we are not perfect. It's okay. I'm gonna lift and bring us back to a couple sentences from the passage from Loving Corrections that I read. So here's one. If accountability happens outside of us and is judged and corrected by others, how can we learn to recognize, let alone honor, our own needs and values? And here's the second one. We are fragile because we are not living with internal clarity around what feels right to us. So we lack the internal capacity to assess the potential harm of each action. I think about this framework, and for me, it's an invitation to reframe our thinking around how we exist in relationships across difference. Right, and the example that I used that was part of my own sort of big reframe and shift was about being in relationship across lines of racial difference. But there are a myriad of ways that we exist in community and in relationship with people who have different identities and different lives than we do. And the same questions apply. And so I experience this framework from Adrienne Marie Brown as a shift, as a reframing away from the orientation of not wanting to offend people, and instead towards an orientation where I am trying to act in alignment with my values. Right? Away, right, that shifting from the question of, right, like how can I avoid getting called out by the people who share my values? Because how many of you you've been about to say something or do something or post something, and you think to yourself, oh my God, I bet the 5 other people I know who share my values, right? I bet my community might say something about this. And that shapes your action. Your fear about what someone else is going to say about what you do. Right, so moving away from that and instead towards what am I called to do because of my values? Because the world we are trying to build, I think about it like this. We have to want it when nobody is watching. Right? We have to want it when nobody will see what we say, when nobody will see what we do. We have to want it even then. And I think about it this way. It's because our theology as Unitarian Universalists isn't a threat. Because how many of you grew up in churches or religious homes where theology, right, ideas about God and life's big questions were seen as a threat? Yeah, like a hammer hanging over your head about to drop if you did anything wrong. But our theology isn't a threat. It's a promise. The whole universalist deal, this is condensing several hundred years of religious history into 2 sentences, so get ready. It's going to go by like that. The whole universalist deal is that we experience a love that is bigger than any of us. And in turn, we center love in our lives. Right? That because we experience that love that is bigger than any of us, our response is to center love in our lives. And those of you who have been around know that sometimes the social justice action arm of Unitarian Universalism is called Side with Love. And sometimes we think about side with love as being about politics. But the idea that we are on the side of love is way more than political positions. And it's way more than just trying to avoid saying offensive things. And but this is the moment where we pause and say that the takeaway from today is not that you can go say offensive things. Okay? I'm looking around like, just so we're all on the same page. Nobody gets to go to work on Monday and say, I have a religious exemption. No. Right? But centering love in our lives is more than trying to avoid saying offensive things, and it's more than trying to conform to someone else's external standard of liberalism or progressivism. Well, Maybe it's not more than those things. Maybe it's less. Maybe it's smaller. It's less certain. It's more intimate. It's less constrained and more relational. Less shame, more complexity. Less fear, more clarity. We don't have to reach far to think about the stakes of our world and our lives, both writ largely and writ intimately, about the people whose lives feel very tenuous right now. Our trans neighbors, our immigrant neighbors, our neighbors on the precipice of losing health care. And in that world, it can be hard to be in conversation, even with people who share our values, about the realities that we're facing, about what our lives are really like, about what it's really going to take. And friends, me too, right? Just because I had this big revelation while I was teaching, and then I went to seminary, and I've been through a lot of workshops about it, I don't have it all figured out either. I don't have the full answer about what it means to live into my values with integrity in a world that is full of complexity and compromise. Maybe I've just learned more about what doesn't work. But here is something that I have found that does work, at least for the time being. In the 1990s, a couple of healthcare practitioners, Professors Melanie Turvalone and Jan Murray Garcia in the Bay Area in California, developed a framework called cultural humility. Right? And there's lots of, oh my goodness, there are a million books and speakers and PowerPoints and videos on YouTube you can watch about how to be more culturally competent. But I have found the cultural humility framework, it's like a Honda Accord from the mid-90s. How is it still driving? But it is, and it's way more reliable than the new car you bought last year. So here's what I like about the cultural humility framework. Is that, and it was developed in healthcare settings, but it works in lots of places. And that my favorite thing about the cultural humility framework is that it begins with ongoing critical self-reflection. Right? It doesn't start with, you have to learn these 10 things about this culture and that culture, right? Like, or you have to, how many of us have been to trainings where somebody just tries to tell you everything you could ever need to know about people who are different from you? And if you just knew the things, then you wouldn't make mistakes. But that much more helpful is when you get a framework that helps you understand how you are in relationship to other people. And I find that this is really helpful for that. And like I said, that it begins with ongoing critical self-reflection. And so I've been Unitarian Universalist my whole life, and I love us. I have dedicated my life to serving Unitarian Universalism, but also sometimes we're a little frustrating. And one of the things that's funny about us is that later in the cultural humility framework is the idea that we need to have institutional accountability. But you know what? Unitarian Universalists, we love institutional accountability. We love to go yell at senators. We love to march and protest and tell everyone how they're doing it wrong. We love that. But we have a lot harder time doing that quiet internal self-reflection about our own actions in relationship with other people. And so my invitation to us today is that as we think about the change we are hoping to see in the world, which is enormous, my invitation for us is to start small. To know that accountability has to come from within, from a grounding in our own values, in the place love has in our own lives. And that when things are murky, because I'm going to tell you a secret. Are you ready to hear a secret? Are you really ready? Okay. I'm going to get closer to the microphone so you really know it's a secret. Not all people of color agree with each other. Not all queer people agree with each other. Not all trans people agree with each other. Not all immigrants agree with each other. And so the idea that you, whatever position of sort of non-marginalized identity you hold in this world, the idea that you can just, like, oh, if I just do whatever the people of color in the meeting tell me to, or I'll do, the way I'll destroy the patriarchy is just by listening to whatever, like, the women in the committee tell me to do. That's not really how it works. Because people don't all agree with each other. And so instead of turning towards that, my invitation is that when things are murky, when it's not clear what the path forward is to instead turn towards our value, to turn towards love at the center, turn towards our centering our values, rather than waiting for someone who we think shares our values to tell us what we should be doing. Our values, right, love in our lives can call us out of that fragility that Adrienne Marie Brown talks about and into those clear, small places of change in relationship with each other. Those small places of change that, if we let them, can change the world. May it be so. Amen.